welcome to Moody Bible Institute. I'm David Wankel, your instructor, and I want to welcome you to this video on Footnotes and Citations, a short video in the Facet video series. Today we're going to talk about the following topics: footnotes, endnotes, citations, and bibliographies, or what are sometimes called works cited. Well, you may have a good question: why is this an important topic? The key truth that I want you to get out of this video is that footnotes and citations are an important part of your Christian testimony as a student and scholar. Well, how am I defining the word testimony? Well, your testimony is your public witness about what God has done and is doing in your life. So here's one positive reason why we use and are so interested in getting our footnotes and citations right. We want to honor others. You need to honor those who came up with the ideas, thoughts, or whatever you are citing in your paper or project. Here I quote from Romans 13:7. Pay everyone what is owed. Taxes to whom taxes are due, revenue to whom revenue is due, respect to whom respect is due, honor to whom honor is due. So this verse reminds us that God wants us to honor those who are due honor, and that includes the people who came up with the quotation or idea that you're using in your paper. And here's a negative reason why we are so interested in footnotes, citations, and bibliographies, and that's because we want to avoid dishonesty. Negatively, you want to avoid dishonesty about the source of your ideas in your writing. Here we quote from Luke 16:10, "And one who is faithful in a very little is also faithful in much. And one who is dishonest in a very little is also dishonest in much." So there's a challenging principle in the Gospel of Luke for us to consider when we think about these seemingly insignificant things at the bottom of our paper. But here, from the words of Jesus, it is something to consider, because when we are faithful in the little things, we will be faithful in much. So this is also an important topic if you have plans for further education, perhaps doctoral studies, if you have plans to write academic material, or if you have plans to write or produce any kind of media for your church or otherwise. And that includes a whole lot of ministries today. Plagiarism is a very serious academic issue. You can lose your grade, course credits, and good standing as a student. So let's transition now and talk about footnotes. Well, footnotes are those little numbered items at the bottom of your paper, and they are related to the thesis statement that you're making in your paper. Your thesis statement is where you are staking a claim. It's where you are stating a proposition, and you need to support this thesis statement with evidence. And the footnotes are where the evidence for your argument can be found. So your claims need to be supported with two types of sources: primary sources and secondary sources. You can also use footnotes for rabbit trails, for ideas that don't really relate directly to your paper, but you think that they are of secondary importance. So you can place those short discussions in your footnotes. Now, we mentioned two types of sources, primary and secondary. Primary sources are typically ancient. That would include the Bible itself, ancient rabbinic sources, Greco-Roman sources, but you could also include things like artifacts, art, coins, anything from the ancient world that's going to support the claim that you're making. Secondary sources are typically modern, from today, and that would include commentaries, monographs, dictionaries, all kinds of books that people write today about the Bible. So You might have another good question. How do I format my sources? Well, the style depends on your program. Here at Moody Bible Institute, the undergraduate students use the MLA, and the graduate students use Turabian or Chicago style. Now, I have a asterisk at the bottom because I want you to be aware of SBL style. The Society of Biblical Literature style is one of the standards used in the areas of biblical studies. So you may want to Google that and look into that for your own edification. Here's a good rule of thumb when you're writing a paper. Use 2 sources per page. So that's going to help you to ensure that each page has enough support for the argument that you should be making in your paper. There are 2 general keys to excellence when we're talking about bibliographies, works cited, footnotes. It all comes down to these 2 things. Pay attention to the details. Every comma, every period, every word and the word placement all matters. So you also want to be consistent. And that means using the same approach in every single time you're placing an entry either in your footnotes or your bibliography. Here's a common mistake, especially for the Chicago style. For the footnotes, make sure that you have first name, then the last name. First name, then the last name for the footnotes. But then in your bibliography, you're going to reverse that and have your last name come before your first name. So I have my forthcoming book here as an example for you to check out. But it's also important for you to look in other style guides and sources on the internet for other examples. Here's another example where students need a little help, and that's with using italics. Italics. So the titles of books and journals are italicized. So you can see here also in my example that the title of my book is italicized up there at the top. Down below, I have another example where you can see 2 things. First, there are quotation marks around the title of the journal article, and then the title of the journal itself is in italics. So hopefully you can see that, pay attention to those details. If you need more help, submit your papers early and ask for help from myself or from your teacher. Use the internet for sources, for examples. And here's one good resource to check out for the Chicago style. That's go to Google and type in Purdue Owl Chicago. Purdue Owl Chicago. Well, that's it for today. Thanks for watching this supplementary video in the Facet video series.